you own it. Let every mile bring a smile, yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Road of Life podcast with Meredith and Craig. Last episode, we started the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse discussion, and we led with criticism.
Yep.
And now this episode, we're going to talk about the second of the four, which is contempt.
Quick recap, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse come from John and Julie Gottmans' research. They're like the gold standard of research into relationships. And these Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are four behaviors that are toxic to a relationship, that are big predictors of relationship failure. And it's criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And so we talked about criticism last week. If you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to it, because contempt builds on criticism. So we're going to start talking about criticism in this episode, so it helps to have the...
Contempt.
Contempt. It helps us have the criticism background before this one.
And contempt is like criticism on steroids almost a little bit. It's criticism with like an air of superiority, like a nose in the air.
Yeah, for sure. It's like criticism like leveled up several levels.
Yeah.
It's criticism that's designed to make the other person feel inferior.
Yeah, feel less than.
In fact, it is the number one predictor of divorce.
If there was one horseman, it would be contempt.
Correct. Yeah. If the worst one of them all
is contempt.
Contempt.
Yeah.
This one, which is scary, but also kind of awesome that we know that so that we can work on it.
Yeah, exactly. So we can head it off at the pass. So, examples of contempt. Oh, good. Another great idea from the peanut gallery.
Sarcasm. I mean, sarcasm sometimes has its place, but not when it's directed at your spouse in a derogatory way.
Yeah. I think another big thing for contempt is the eye rolling and sneering and the
dismiss.
The dismissiveness of it. Like the eye roll and the like, oh my God. Like, what a stupid idea. Like, are you really bringing that up again? Like, like that type of...
Yeah. Which you see a lot in especially teenage girls. In my experience lately, you see a little more of that.
Well, it's what we talked about last episode with criticism is it's a learned behavior. It's something that you probably grew up with your friends as teenagers, and it's something you just carry with you into your other relationships as an adult.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. You got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But to your point, contempt, no different. You probably experienced it and did it with your friends growing up.
Yeah. It certainly gives me a vibe of familiarity as a teenage girl, for sure. Like, I have a Judge-Judy-Level eye roll that I deploy sometimes that...
Can confirm.
the need to harness in. And I think the third way that contempt shows up is name-calling. I think name-calling is another way that we bring that horseman, we bring contempt into our relationships. And we've said it before in the disagreeing productively episode that we've done, that there's no place ever for name calling in your relationship, like literally ever, never.
It's destructive. It's completely toxic. There's no reason to ever refer to your spouse or partner by anything other than their name, unless it's something like babe or like
Term
a
of
loving, endearing term.
That they're comfortable with, that you both enjoy.
Of course. But like name calling is just a no-go zone.
Yeah.
It's never going to serve you or your relationship.
So keeping an eye on the sneaky ways that contempt slides in is sarcasm, name calling, and that eye roll / dismissiveness, sneer vibe. So those are the three ways that contempt is sneaking into your relationship.
Yeah.
And contempt is so toxic because the person who receives it, it's so belittling, makes them feel so unworthy.
And we talked about this last episode too, is that there's already an epidemic of unworthiness in this world. Like, we're all already battling this. The one place where we shouldn't have to feel like it's an unsafe space is with our spouse. We should at least feel like we're worthy there, if nowhere else, there. And when contempt comes into it, you don't even have it there.
No.
It makes you feel less than even in your relationship.
Yeah. So like belittled, unworthy, and just
disrespected.
There's no respect when there's contempt. And when there's no respect in your relationship, it's in very serious trouble.
Like, that's the one thing we say is like your relationship has to have at least a foundation of respect. And to your point, contempt means that there is no foundation. There is no respect.
Yeah.
And when there's no respect, you are on a very, very shaky ground.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had this conversation with Sharon Lecter, who we actually, I think, mentioned in the last episode. Very successful, famous author. And she's been married, her and her husband have been married for, I'm not sure how long.
40-something years, I think.
Like multiple decades, like a very, very long time. And I asked her about what was the secret for their relationship, and she has 2 secrets to their relationship. The first one is kind of funny, but still true, and it's separate bathrooms. And I can totally get that with all the little ginger beards. And the second one is respect. You don't have to like each other, but you have to respect each other. She firmly believes that respect...
In the moment. You don't have to like each other every moment.
Correct.
There might be disagreements where you feel like, oh, I want to wring this person's neck.
Correct.
But there's always the
But
base
you
level
always
of respect.
them. Yeah. So when there's no respect left in your relationship, if the contempt has eroded your respect, you were on very shaky ground.
Yeah.
So why do we let contempt in? If it's so toxic, it's the #1 predictor of divorce. How do we let it in?
Why?
Yeah.
Most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's because we've had these needs that have gone unmet for so long. Like we're just drained and we're not feeling as though we're heard or respected in our relationship, so we lash out and we disrespect and put it out to the other person.
Yeah. And that often comes, I think, from my perspective and my experience, I'm a very conflict averse person. I wasn't always, but I have been through most of my adult life, very conflict averse. And that hasn't served me, because I would avoid conflict in the moment, but let my resentment simmer under the surface. And we don't do that. We've gotten rid of that in me in our relationship, but I have to fight my natural instinct all the time to address things in a timely manner, in a functional, constructive way, even when it's uncomfortable. And I've seen it in the past, how I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to cause a fight. I don't want to get into a disagreement, so I'm just going to let that go.
And little do you know that it's actually the worst thing you can do, because it's going to cause a way bigger issue down the line.
Correct.
Because you're going to then start to feel resentment towards that person.
Correct.
You're going to start to roll your eyes at that person.
Yep.
You're going to start to be like, ugh, like
This again?
Again?
Yeah.
Like, have we
Are
not...
we serious with this?
Right. Yeah. Contempt.
Yeah.
Relationship
100%.
doomed.
Correct. Yeah. And so that's a hard lesson I've had to learn, that I still have to logically get myself there every time, that let's have this conversation, even though I'm uncomfortable, even though I don't want to, because I don't want the downstream impacts of contempt bubbling up, the resentment bubbling up inside of me, because I wasn't willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and have a conversation. And one way that really clicked for me was, because I'm a natural peacemaker in my family and everywhere, that the question to ask is, whose peace am I keeping in those situations?
Yeah.
When I'm being a peacemaker and I don't want to cause trouble,
Yeah.
whose peace am I keeping? And the way the resentment builds and builds, it's not mine.
Yeah.
I'm not keeping peace inside of me.
And you're not keeping peace, like in the moment you are, but down the line it's going to come out.
Correct.
And so you're not actually, you're keeping the peace for a moment, but down long term you're not.
No.
And it's really a really great example of short-term discomfort for long-term
Comfort. Or short-term discomfort instead of long-term dysfunction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction.
I think another way that sometimes we let contempt in, or why we let contempt in, is because we grew up with it, to your point earlier, whether it was
Yeah.
in our friend group or in our family, or
sure.
maybe in a toxic work culture. It's if we've learned that along the way, then it becomes one of our modes of communication, and we don't even realize that it is as toxic as it is, because we've just
Grew up with it.
accepted it as normal.
Yeah, and it's a function of feeling frustrated. It's when we're frustrated, that's how we, a lot of times, deal with it, is through acts of contempt and making sure that we feel seen or heard. And because, the way we have been doing it, I feel unseen or undervalued. So I'm going to change tactics here, and I'm going to get contemptuous and be seen or be valued. But in the long run, it's destructive. It's not.
Yeah. The contempt comes out in a moment of trying to make yourself feel better, feel good enough, feel respected, valued, seen. So if you can talk down to someone else, you must be up higher than them, and it just doesn't work.
And the thing is, like, you do that because you feel unseen, unheard, undervalued. So in other words, it's not really a safe space for you, so you do it this way. But now you're actually destroying it forever being a safe space. Like, you're making it an unsafer space, if that makes any sense. Like, it's counterproductive to what you really want. You want to feel seen, heard, and valued. In other words, you want a safe space. But by showing contempt for the other person, the eye rolls, the name calling, all those things, you're actually making it so much worse. It's a much unsafer space that the other person's going to, and we talked about it last episode, you stack on top of each other. When you feel contempt from someone, you want to lash out because you feel hurt. And you want to lash out. Your default mode is like, oh, I feel hurt. I want to lash back out and feel hurt. I want them to feel hurt. And you pile on.
And it escalates, and it's a vicious cycle.
And it's number one reason.
That's why it's the number one cause of divorce.
Exactly. The other thing that we haven't really touched on is that the relationship issues, but not only that, but the health. The health concern that something like this can bring to you. So yes, it is devastating to your relationship. It's also not good for your personal health.
Your actual physical and mental health. If you're on the receiving end of contempt.
Stress, you're stressed out. We already know what stress can do. Increase in stress, lack of sleep, you're going to eat your feelings probably. Like, it's just knock-on effects that, and then your weakened immune system. Like, it's just terrible for your overall well-being.
Yeah, for sure. So what do we do about it?
Stop doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the antidote to contempt?
It's like we talked about in the last episode with criticism. The more you focus on the negative, the more negative you're going to get. The more you focus on positive, the more positive you're going to get. The antidote to contempt is similar to what we talked about last episode with criticism. And it's really about focusing on gratitude and appreciating the positive things that your partner does, the good that is in your relationship. If you're eye rolling or name calling, get that out of your system.
Catch yourself doing it.
Stop doing that immediately. Get that out of your repertoire and focus on appreciation and gratitude. What are the things that they do well? What are the things that you really love and appreciate about your partner?
And focus on the little things. Like, it's all about finding the things to be grateful for and finding the things to appreciate. So look for the little things to appreciate. There's a million little things in the run of your day that you can appreciate for you and from your partner. So find the little things. Trying to find great big things to focus on becomes really challenging and overwhelming, and you're probably already in an overwhelmed state if you're letting contempt sneak in. So try to focus on the tiny little things in your day and in your relationship that you can appreciate. So again, trying to catch yourself before your eyes roll and replace that with kindness and respect.
You have to have respect. Remember what we said earlier. If there's contempt, there's no respect. We need to replace contempt with respect. There has to be that foundation of respect.
So instead of rolling your eyes, instead of calling a name, instead of getting sarcastic, say something kind. Just literally anything kind.
Instead of, oh, are you really talking about this again? Be like, you know what? That's a really great idea. Tell me more about it.
Even if you don't necessarily feel that way in the moment, leading with kindness.
Chances are you've actually never really even put forward the time to actually listen to that idea. You've heard it several times and thought it was stupid from the outset and just dismissed it outright.
Right.
But if you actually give it some time, they think that thing for a reason, and they've brought it up several times for a reason. Maybe leading with curiosity and understanding where they're coming from a little bit more might change your outlook on what they're suggesting.
Yeah, like listening to actually understand them instead of just listening to respond with your sarcastic
comment. And that's just one very specific
Mm-hmm.
example that may or may not work for in every situation. But it really is lead with kindness. Like, there's not enough kindness in this world.
Yeah, there's a kindness shortage for sure. So if you can find yourself in that moment, stopping yourself before the name calling, say something kind.
Especially like in your relationship, this is where we want you to have the safest of spaces, both of you. And so if there's no kindness, if there's no respect, then you have a very unsafe space. Like, what are we doing? This is supposed to be the place where you get kindness. And because we talk about, like, the world is already, up in turmoil, and there's a lot going on, and some might say a general lack of kindness in a lot of places in the world right now. That shouldn't be the case. Your relationship should be the one place where you can rely on kindness and respect and have a safe space.
And so instead of coming out with something like, "Oh, you're so clueless," something reframe the contempt.
Oh my God, you're so full of clues.
Not where I was going. That still feels a bit sarcastic. Where I was going to go was, we obviously, instead of "you're so clueless," is we obviously see this differently.
Yeah.
Let's try and figure out some common ground here.
Yeah.
Something pretty simple, really.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we talked about how generally contempt is coming from an underlying frustration, resentment that we've let simmer under the surface, whether it's trying to be the peacemaker or being conflict averse or just trying to avoid that discomfort as long as we can. But that obviously, that resentment, that unmet need, that frustration is coming out in a way that is super duper toxic in your relationship.
Yeah.
So we need to look at what's going on under the surface and address that unmet need or resolve that resentment or that frustration. What is causing that frustration and resentment inside of you? And then have a difficult conversation, an uncomfortable conversation. And we'll link to our episode on having uncomfortable conversations. So you've got the sort of guidelines, and we'll be able to do it a little bit easier. An easier button, not an easy button, because none of those conversations are easy, but working on those unmet needs and that underlying resentment so it's not bubbling this contempt up inside of you.
Yeah. So I think that's it for contempt. And we're going to talk about defensiveness, I believe, in the next episode.
That's
the
correct.
third Horseman of the Apocalypse. So stay tuned for that next week. What's the one takeaway that you're going to do now that, we've had this conversation, we've talked a lot about contempt? What's one thing that you can take away and commit to doing in your relationship to get rid of contempt and replace it with respect?
So we love having these conversations with you, but
we have to do something.
we got to take some action after.
We have to do something.
And so share this episode. Another action step, besides your one action you're going to take from it, another action step is sharing it. Share this episode, share this message with someone who needs it. I don't know who that is for you, but you know who that is for you. Share it with someone who needs it. And we will see you next week, and we'll talk all about defensiveness. Okay, before we wrap up, we just want to remind you about something really special we've created, the Infinite Relationship Mastermind. It's like a VIP backstage pass for anyone looking to level up any and all of the relationships in their life. And we're not just talking about the relationship with your spouse, though it does include that one. We're also talking about the relationships with yourself, your friends, your business partners, your family, all the important people in your life. This mastermind is for anyone ready to take all of their relationships to a whole new level. Whether you're thriving and you want to thrive even more, or you're feeling a little stuck and need some extra love and support.
We host exclusive live courses. We create a safe, no judgment space where members can just open up and honestly just have a ton of fun connecting with other amazing people who are building stronger relationships. And to be honest, the transformations we've seen are incredible, and it's exactly why we do what we do. It fills our heart like nothing else. Now, we are super protective of this community because it is all about trust, love, and support. So it's not for everybody. But if this does sound like it might tickle your fancy, and honestly, who doesn't love having their fancy tickled, then check out the link in the show notes and reach out to us if you have any questions. We'd love to chat and see if it's a fit for you. And as always, thank you so much for being a part of our journey on the road of life. And remember, you've got this, and we're here to help you every step of the way. So we'll see you next week.
Bye for now.
Road of life, yes, you're on it.